55.5% to 112.3 billion shillings. The rising costs within the agricultural sector have also impacted on the cost of food production, and farmers are now desperate to see prices of fertilizers, feeds, and other inputs brought down. So this is the reality that the president-elect has to deal with. Also just moments away from IPRA announcing the new fuel prices, like I mentioned earlier on, and it has to decide whether there's going to be, the subsidy will continue or not. Pundits say that it is not sustainable in the long run. Another thing that the president-elect has to deal with almost immediately is that Kenya owes its international and external creditors up to 8.56 trillion, which is about 67% of the country's GDP. So Kenya spent 1.17 trillion to service debt in the 2021-2022 financial year against the revenue collection of 2 trillion. So that is almost close to 80% of the collected money goes to servicing debt. That is before you bring in recurrent expenditure and all that. So the public debt, when President Ruto walks into his new office at Harambee House, he will find a national treasury that has in excess of 8.56 trillion in debt for both foreign and domestic creditors. Treasury will be at the center of the president's administration and will be tasked with equitably distributing the scarce resources generated from revenue, loans, and grants to both the national government and the county governments as well. The debt burden, which is now about 67% of the country's gross domestic product, has had a huge impact on government spending in the financial year 2021-2022, debt servicing costs hitting 1.17 trillion. So there are pundits who say that the fact that he was in the previous government, which invested heavily in projects that will not have immediate returns, pushing the government's debt to the current level, now finds a rigged economy with a high cost of living and fulfilling his promises, especially within the first 100 days, pundits say will be somewhat of a miracle. You can see there, those are pictures, live pictures from Kasarani, like I mentioned, inside and outside. There's heavy security deployment outside of the Kasarani Stadium, where several thousands of people are making their way into the stadium. Earlier on, there was a stampede. There's a section of the wall that has been breached, and the security deployment is heavier now. You can even see that region from a distance. Quite a number of injuries were also reported there as the people tried to forcefully make their way into the Kasarani Stadium. We saw some paramedics carrying a few people away to different places there to receive treatment. We're yet to establish how many of them were injured in the process and what caused the stampede that people breached the wall heading into the inauguration place where Kasarani Stadium is located. So we're talking about the general entry for the president-elect, and also let's take a look at the issues of public debt. So KRA raised a record revenue of 2 trillion during the period, which means that for every 10 shillings collected, 6 went to servicing debt, squeezing the development agenda. Because if they collected 2 trillion and in 2021-2022 financial year, 1.17 trillion was paid back in debt, that's about, for every 10 shillings collected, 6 went to servicing debt, squeezing the development budget. So President Ruto said that he had already had talks with KRA and Treasury on how to increase tax collection and reduce government borrowing. But President Ruto will also find himself in a tight spot that will need him to delicately balance how to raise enough revenue to implement the projects he promised, while also easing the tax burden on households and businesses that are struggling under tough taxation regime. Experts reckon that Dr. Ruto's administration has to prioritize cutting expenditure on non-priority items and tackle corruption to cut the budget deficit and lower the debt accumulation as well. The proposed national tax policy, which will be reviewed every 5 years, will also be another thorn in the flesh as it proposes to impose presumptive tax on the informal businesses and subsistence farmers in an effort by the taxman to squeeze the extra coin from the people's pockets to the government's coffers. So the Kenya economy is dominated by subsistence agriculture and a large informal sector, which are difficult and uneconomical to tax. Well, President Ruto will also immediately be confronted by a high cost of living that has pushed many basic commodities out of the reach of poor Kenyans. Annual inflation has hit 8.5% in August, the highest in 5 years, driven by a sharp increase in the cost of food and fuel. Like I mentioned earlier on, IPRA will be giving the reviewed cost of fuel by this evening, which takes effect from 12 a.m. this evening and will have to be dealt with by the people through the day. And this is the time when the president-elect, who at that time will be the president after his inauguration, will then have to tell the people whether the subsidy will continue or not. Pundits say it should not because it is not sustainable in the long run, but that will lead to a significant jump of fuel prices at the pump as we speak. As you can see, this is the event that is happening live at the Kasarani Stadium anytime from now. There are quite a number of people who are coming in as well. There's a breach of the security wall there by quite a number of people stampeding into the area. Injuries have been reported. We have to establish how many people have been injured and what caused the stampede in that region. But a delegation of more than 60,000 people are expected at the Kasarani Stadium. 20 heads of state also expected. There are further 20,000 expected to follow the proceedings. And the nation at large tuned in to see the inauguration of the 5th president of the Republic of Kenya, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, which is happening today at the Kasarani Stadium. As we speak, we'll cross over to our reporters there to find out what the latest is as they prepare for a full entry that the president-elect, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, and his deputy, Rigathi Gachagua, have to deal with when they assume office this morning. The Constitution says that they have to do this between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. today. And people are told that they need to be seated by 8 a.m. and the program will begin at that point where the inauguration will begin at the Kasarani Stadium. We have people who are there, reporters on the ground. Ayub Abdikadir is joining us live. Seth Olale is also there. Stephen Leto will also come in at some point. Ayub, good morning. It's good to see you. So we saw earlier on pictures of people breaching the security walls and making their way into the stadium. What really happened there? Ayub?
Good morning from the Kasarani Stadium. It's 49 minutes past 6 o'clock and Kenyans in their thousands have attended this important exercise, which will be kick-starting officially from 10 a.m. and set to end at 2 p.m., which within is the constitutional timeline. And it is the very important exercise that will be happening as President Uhuru Kenyatta hands over the instruments of power as the tenure comes to an end today, marking the 10-year since he was elected in office in 2013. And later on, we're expecting much of the activities to be taking place here at the Kasarani International Stadium, including the dignitaries who have arrived in the country, including heads of state from the African continent and delegations sent by countries including the United States of America and China. With me is our political affairs reporter, Seth Olale, who we have been here together in the observation of how Kenyans have been thronged in JC Stadium, and the thousands of Kenyans who have been here since early morning. Others are kept outside because the stadium is now full to capacity. And Seth, much of the observations here, the electric environment over here, and an important day Kenyans are looking forward to as the new president will be inaugurated later.
And of course, it's a public holiday meant for this particular occasion. It was interesting to see, Ayub, as early as 3 a.m., Kenyans across all walks of life had already arrived here at the Kasarani Stadium. There was quite an incident at about 6 a.m. when a perimeter fence was actually broken into by a section of the crowd, perhaps just raising some of the security concerns even ahead of this particular event. What we know is that security has been beefed up inside and outside the stadium. Right now, the 60,000 capacity Kasarani International Stadium is full. And what we know, Ayub, is that there's still more people outside the perimeter fence. So it will be interesting to see if the organizers will let them in, or they will organize at least big screens on the outside. But so far, so good in terms of preparations. You can see the MCs are already testing the public address system. We are expecting the KDF to take its position any moment from now. And of course, like you mentioned, at least 20 heads of states are already in the country. And even notably is the East African community heads of states and, delegations already arriving here, just telling you that the region takes this particular inauguration very seriously.
And of utmost significance, Seth, is whilst this is a constitutional process, and President Uhuru Kenyatta yesterday underscoring the importance this day bears in handing over the instruments of power. Not only he said places Kenya at the very top in terms of democratic ideals and the credentials thereof, but also becoming a beacon and the strong delegation sent by the world powers, China and the United States of America, who will be here alongside other heads of state. And going forward then, isn't it one that also among the community of nations makes Kenya to stand tall and take pride in the democratic process that happened on the 9th of August, and how this further consolidate our constitutional principles?
Exactly, and that's why there were over 200 international observers in the country, because the particular elections that was witnessed on the August 9th, it was a landmark not only to the East African region but Africa as well. And you've seen how the reaction has been since the general election, the congratulatory messages, from the heads of states, from the dignitaries and observers around the world, stating that indeed Kenya produced quite a significant exercise. And you know what? The peace and stability that has prevailed even after the election is quite admirable. And what we know is that there are some key personalities that will be of greater significance today. We're talking about the Registrar of the Judiciary, Anna Hamadi. We're talking about the Chief Justice, Martha Koome, who will actually administer the process of oath-taking. And of course, the man of the moment, William Ruto, the president-elect, and his predecessor, Uhuru Kenyatta. And of course, the First Lady is involved. And of course, the Deputy President-elect, Rigathi Gachagua. Some of the key personalities that we are waiting. But so now, the electric moment, the crowd cheering around us, the 60,000 supporters and Kenyans who've just come to witness this particular historic moment.
And Seth, it's because of the environment over here, but then the cheer that is coming from the thousands of Kenyans here is a demonstration of them coming out and the hope they have in the incoming administration in terms of the economy, in terms of setting the record straight and the expectations. This is largely a demonstration of how pregnant the public is, and going forward is an expectation they have of a government that will be inaugurated today of the President-elect Deputy President Dr. William Ruto. And then the economy, which is largely an important pillar of the Deputy President's manifesto, launched here at the gymnasium. How close will they be watching how this will be done, the economy, and I mean, Kenyans wanting to feel the value of the shilling in their pocket?
Exactly, Ayub, because even the president-elect himself, on numerous occasions, even after he was elected into office, he's been saying that one of his greatest concerns will be uniting the country after a very hectic and a very close call in terms of the campaigns and the political temperatures. So his call and his take immediately after he was declared president-elect at the Bomas of Kenya by the IEBC chairperson Wafula Chebukati, William Ruto did say his main agenda will be uniting the country, and thereafter, of course, just executing his mandate, and especially the manifesto of the Kenya Kwanza Alliance. So what we know is that from his previous public appearance, and especially on Sundays, where he's been attending church services, we saw him in Kiambu County, we also saw him in Meru County, and in each and every occasion, he did say that much of what is being expected to say, he will say it today during his grand inauguration. So we expect the president-elect speech to contain issues to do with, cohesion, unity after the election, and now moving forward. Remember that the president-elect, William Ruto, also talked about working with those who actually competed against him in this particular election.
And Seth, today is a set-piece moment. I mean, the election process is over with President Uhuru Kenyatta, who will be handing over the instruments of authority. It bears otherwise also a very monumental exercise that will be happening here. It's the second time under the current constitutional dispensation where power is handed over from one authority to the other, and the commitment made by the president yesterday. Therefore, going forward, how does this further embolden the aspirations of the Kenyan people they had under the current constitutional dispensation that we promulgated in 2010?
I think it puts the country to another level in terms of democracy, civilization. It puts us at par with other modern, other developed nations, I might say. And that one also cements the kind of democracy, the kind of the constitutional protection that is being upheld by the people of Kenya. And like you said, the deputy president or the president-elect, William Ruto, earlier on did say that he hopes that his predecessor, Uhuru Kenyatta, will oversee a peaceful transition of power. And indeed, the outgoing president, Uhuru Kenyatta, has been committed. We saw yesterday the president, Uhuru Kenyatta, and the first lady, Margaret Kenyatta, hosting the incoming president and the incoming first lady at State House. And also remember that during the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition parliamentary group meeting at the Masai Lodge in Kajiado County, the president said that he will be smiling, handing over the instruments of power. So maybe just a clear indication that the head of state is clear to make sure and committed to make sure that the constitutional journey Kenya began in 2010 actually take precedence in today's particular historic inauguration.
And said there is one element that stands out when you look at the promises that were made by either side of the political divide, and the Kenyan people are accorded the mandate to one side of the divide. How does then the deputy president appeal the message of reconciliation to the other people on the other side, on the other island part of the political divide, in terms of striking that reconciliatory tone going forward? And the message that came from President Kenyatta yesterday, that look, Mr. President-elect, you will be the president of Kenya, not only for those who had voted for you. How do you think he can go about that? Because there seems to be also, going forward, the part that opposed you during the campaign.
You know, being elected into office is one thing. Executing the mandate and that which you promised Kenyans, it's a totally different thing. But the president-elect, William Ruto, said when he was asked by one of the journalists, when the Supreme Court actually upheld his presidency in that landmark ruling by the Apex Court, the president-elect did say that, you know what, there is a lot of pressure, there is a lot of expectations, and especially during his first 100 days in office, one of the key agenda for the Kenya Kwanza Alliance was reducing the cost of living through improving the economy. And you know, that is what Kenyans will be expecting in the first 100 days of office. Issues to do with unga, the prices of unga, and many other basic commodities, the subsidies that is going to be introduced in food products, in the agricultural products, in the petroleum products, which are very key and core in the industrialization sector. So for me, I think that President-elect William Ruto today is expected just to hit back and to revisit the Kenya Kwanza Alliance manifesto in ensuring that he delivers on that which he promised the country and especially his supporters during the official 90 days campaign period.
And it was over the weekend said that the president-elect had said that he looks forward to rebooting the agriculture sector. He talked about the Miraa exports to Somalia. And President Hassan will be here today alongside other African heads of state and delegations who will be representing their governments here. And it shows how agriculture is the centerpiece of William Ruto's manifesto, what he called the plan that he launched here at the Kasarani Gymnasium Indoors Arena. Going forward then, the cost of living, whoever Kenyans would have accorded the mandate, would be very important. How hopeful should they be going forward then? How realizable is that post the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of rescaling the country's economy? Talking about public debt and the very basics of the return on investments that the Deputy President talked about during the campaigns, now the President-elect, and he said going forward, agriculture will be of concern. I mean, how does he then balance all this that is crumbling for his attention and the attention of his government going forward?
Exactly, and that is why the Kenya Kwanza Alliance in its manifesto stated that it will reduce the cost of fertilizer from 6,000 shillings to 2,500, and that the government will inject subsidies that will cushion farmers towards the high prices of fertilizer. And the Kenya Kwanza Alliance, I remember very well when I covered some of their campaigns, did say that agriculture is the backbone in terms of economy, in terms of GDP of the nation. And so for them, it would be key to safeguard the farmers, to safeguard the agricultural sector. They talked about weeding out cartels. And you can remember when the president-elect was in Meru just recently, did say that he will deal with the cartels. And we know that the coffee industry, the tea industry in the country, the petroleum industry, and many other agricultural departments have been complaining about cartels, about the middlemen. So maybe a call by the deputy, or rather the president-elect in Meru on Sunday, stating very clearly that upon putting the biblical oath of instrument down, after being sworn in, he will straightforward go for these particular cartels. And we hope that who will benefit after this, it will be the farmer.
And Seth, another important element which was also a standalone aspect was the commitment that he made in his manifesto, that is the president-elect, of constitutionalism. He said he will oversee the implementation of Katiba 2010, and he cited institutions of government which he said ought to be given their independence as enshrined in law. He talked about the DCI, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, the Kenya Revenue Authority, which he said during the campaigns were rather weaponized, and that he's going to inject billions of shillings to ensure that there is independence which they are guaranteed under the constitution. How do you think then this will be undertaken? Because constitutionalism and the rule of law is very key going forward for the emboldening of the country's democracy.
Indeed, Ayub, the president-elect, who's now just hours away of becoming the 5th president of the nation, has been on the forefront in defending the constitution. He was so much against the Building Bridges initiative because, according to him, the basic structure of the constitution was going to be changed. And those are some of the issues that were raised in those who were against the BBI. So asking me about the president-elect and the Kenya Kwanza Alliance upholding the 2010 constitution, I think they've been on the forefront. And that is why when we went to the Supreme Court in determination of the fate of the BBI, they did mention that they feared that, you know, some of the principles, some of the tradition that the 2010 constitution is currently upholding will be taken away. And the president was the president-elect was very categorical in regards to protection of the judiciary. Remember, he was against what he termed that there was an attempt by the BBA to bring a prefect to preside over the judiciary. So for me, I think this particular incoming administration will be very key in making sure that the 2010 constitution, which Kenyans overwhelmingly through a consensus actually chose these particular laws to govern the land. I think the Kenya Kwanza Alliance will uphold the 2010 constitution. There will be protection of the constitutional commissions and all that.
And what you are seeing on your screens at the moment are pictures of the 3 services of the Kenya Defence Forces. And this is the Kenya Army, the Kenya Air Force, and the Kenya Navy. who are preparing for the entrance of the pitch, where they will be lining up waiting for President Uhuru Kenyatta, who will be inspecting a guard of honor today. And it will be happening here at the Moi Sports Center, Kasarani, where then he will go to the podium, where he will oversee the handing over of the instruments of power to the president-elect, that is Dr. William Ruto. And they're now preparing for one more gathering before they set their fit on the pitch, as is the tradition by the Kenya Defence Forces, who had given President Uhuru Kenyatta a Kwaheri salute this week at the Langata Barracks, where that event happened, and President Uhuru Kenyatta overseeing that engagement with the Kenya Defence Forces, all the three services, the Kenya Defence Forces, the Kenya Navy, the Kenya Defence Forces, and the Kenya Army, and the Air Force of the Kenya Defence Forces, all who will be here. And this as part of the inauguration day, and this happening at the Moi Sports Center, Kasarani, where the President-elect, Deputy President Dr. William Ruto, will be handed over the instruments of power, a reign that he will begin as the fifth President of the Republic of Kenya. And said this, pointing to again what has been the ruling Jubilee Party, and going forward, the pledge that the President and the Deputy President made in September 2016 in coming up with a political party that will end ethnic balkanization in the country, that will be based on a unity platform. But that was never the clear picture into 2022. Now the Jubilee Party, not in the shape it was in 2017, shot by about 62 MPs to have an absolute majority in Parliament. Then now less than 50 members of Parliament in the National Assembly. And what does this point to in terms of the politics of ideals and policies, and whether this can be instilled going forward to further cement the country's political establishment?
I think UDA managed to convince the masses, to convince Kenyans that, what they are selling to them in terms of the manifesto is ideal and realistic, and, captures, the rightful moments in it. And so I think the UDA did very well. You can see the numbers, Ayub, in the National Assembly, in the Senate, and now the Kenya Kwanza Alliance at large, controlling both houses in terms of leadership. But talking about the Speaker of the National Assembly, being Moses Wetangula of the Kenya Kwanza Alliance, and also Amason Kingi, the Speaker of the Senate, just telling you, what UDA Kenya Kwanza Alliance took the presidency very seriously, took governance very seriously, not only in the executive, but now we're talking about the legislature, the legislation bit of it, because they control. So going back to what UDA, what Kenya Kwanza Alliance, you saw the massive campaign they initiated, at some point, just even now dividing themselves, towards the tail end of the election. And so they were very serious in what they were, selling out to the masses. And so I think this is now an opportunity for the leadership of the Kenya Kwanza Alliance now to tell the masses and to tell their supporters, what, this is what we promised. But it was not just an empty talk. It is now time to implement, and we need your support towards this. And you talked about, Ayub, about the guys in uniform now taking instructions before mounting that particular guard of honor. It's also going to be the last one for the outgoing President Uhuru Kenyatta.
As the Commander-in-Chief, and we now take you back to studio. And beyond the firm pledges made, firm commitments are required. That's the clarion call from Kenyans who are gathered in their thousands here. We take you back to studio at the Communications Center.
Well, thanks, Ayub Abdikadir there, and Seth Olale speaking to us live from the Kasarani Stadium, where a delegation of more than 60,000 people are expected there. As early as 4:30 a.m., people had already started streaming in, and we'll cross over back to Ayub to find out what the people's sentiments are, because the stadium is almost full to capacity at this particular moment. We know earlier on there was a bit of a security breach when quite a number of people forced their way into the stadium. There were a few injuries there reported. We'll find out how many and whether the injuries are serious or not. They were not that serious because they were taken out by the paramedics and treated with the ambulances that were there. We'll cross over there soon as action begins, and there's a lot of action right now as we speak. The inauguration kicks off at exactly 8 a.m. all the way. According to the Constitution, the inauguration is supposed to happen, the oath of office is supposed to happen between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. p.m. stipulated by the Constitution. We'll keep live pictures there of Kasarani Stadium as entertainment continues, and the delegation is expected there as well. More than 20 heads of state expected in the Kasarani Stadium, and a delegation of more than 60,000 Kenyans also expected there. They started streaming in as early as 4 a.m. But also with me in studio as we take a pulse of what's going on at Kasarani is Brigadier General retired Ahmed Mohamed. Is the Director, Center for Security and Strategic Studies, also the National Defense University of Kenya, that's NDUK. Thank you so much for making time. Also Professor Alfred Omenya is here, Urban Development Plan. Asante sana for making time. And Gabriel Muduma, Governance and Policy Expert, is also with me in studio. Thank you so much for making time. We'll keep live pictures of the Kasarani Stadium as we also take a pulse of what the entry for the Deputy President-elect and the President-elect is as the inauguration kicks off in a short while. You can see there live pictures of preparations by the disciplined forces taking place there. And in fact, Brigadier, let's start right there. What do you expect today in terms of the protocols?
Oh, thank you much, Trevor, and thank you for having me again today and the team. It will be a good day today, of course, to see the handover of power to the new president, and to acknowledge that the armed forces, as always, will play a key role in terms of the ceremony, in terms of the handover to the new president, and of course, indeed, for the armed forces, the new commander-in-chief. Definitely a great day, a lot of pomp and glory, and the armed forces, as always, will play their key role to ensure that it goes smooth, and that instruments are handed over in a very professional manner indeed. Yeah,
we saw quite a number of them getting ready earlier on there, just a bit of warm-up there. So what kind of cadres do we expect of the military?
Well, I should mention that the warm-ups are part of what we do in our normal practice. You know, in terms, you see us in the barracks and all that. You'll see us taking morning jogs, in terms of taking press-ups and all that, and it's a requirement that even to serve, you must be professionally very fit, as always. So it's important that in the morning we do this. Now what you see is more like the soldiers themselves before the command arrives, you know, just to open up, freshen up, and be ready for the day.
Yeah. So is it significant that the Kenya Army, the Navy, and the Air Force are there? And who ranks higher than who in the military?
Well, Trevor, we call them the Kenya Armed Forces. I don't see Army, Navy, Air Force. It's the Kenya Armed Forces. Of course, within that, there are three services. And normally, each nation will have its own preference in terms of which is the senior arm. For the Kenya Armed Forces, senior arm is the Kenya Army, then followed by the Kenya Air Force, and finally, the Kenya Navy. Now, you know, in the UK it's different. It is the Navy that takes the lead in terms of the key arm. Of course, because if you go back to the historical days of UK, the wars were fought over the oceans and the seas, and therefore the key arm was the Navy to deliver in that regard.
Yeah. In terms of protocol, we know there's quite a lot that's going to happen. There's going to be a chain that will be handed over. There's a sword and there's a constitution. What do these items signify, especially the chain? Or is it the sword that is in relation to the military? Which one is it?
Now, what we will be handing over today to the Commander-in-Chief are the instruments of power. And of course, the first and major instrument of power in this regard is the Constitution. That as it does his normal routines, he's always guided by the Constitution in all that he does as a key instrument in all this. Then secondly, he'll be awarded the Sword of Honor. The Sword of Honor comes out of practice. Yeah, that's just a normal drill. That's one just kept secure, and somebody's guarding them to ensure, as always, they are guarded.
In fact, I was just about to ask you before we get into that what we're seeing on the screen.
No. So that is a normal practice where you can't go and do your morning jog with the arm, and therefore it's normally put together in a very good manner and guarded securely to ensure there's no interference from anybody as that goes on.
Okay.
That's just a normal drill to ensure it is all secure.
Okay.
So here back to the sword then, it has a lot of significance in terms of the fact that it reflects power and authority.
Yeah.
And in war in the past, you know, you find the commander having a sword. And that sword is where he'll give direction, move, get going. That's the direction, and they follow. And the tradition falls way back, actually, you'll be surprised, to those traditional wars. But in modern times, much more, it comes from Japan, where the Japanese samurai what was very popular with the empire and the rulers at that time, that whenever they are, whether king or queen, that sword is the authority. That has been carried on all through, and what we see now today, adopted almost all over.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And then there's a chain. There's, out of the instruments of power, there's a golden chain that will then be given to the president as well.
That is much more of the medal.
Okay.
Yeah, you see, at any one time, you'll find that only one person has that senior medal. The senior, and again, remember, the power to award honors and awards is vested in the presidency. Even when anybody gets that award, it's in the name of the presidency. Now, in the country, normally, we have different awards, starting from the CGH, which is the highest honor in this country. The CGS at any one time is reserved for the commander-in-chief.
Okay.
Those below him, which are quite a number,
Yeah.
will have, now the CGS is the chief of the Golden Heart.
Yeah.
Below him is that's the first order. Second order is the elder of the Golden Heart, the EGH. Today, as we sit now, the president-elect is an EGH. The elder of the Golden Heart.
Yeah.
The CDF is an EGH, the elder of the Golden Heart, and a few others. Only one sitting person enjoys the chief of CGH. Today, therefore, the president, in handing over, will award the president-elect the chief of the Golden Heart, the CGH, with that chain you'll see being handed over, which is very key as part of the ceremony.
All right. Thanks, Brigadier. We'll stay with you for the protocol part of it. I'll keep you out of the politics. Now we have Professor and Gabriel Muduma out of it. Prof, let's start with you there. We've been through this with you, right from the election all the way to voting up until now.
Right.
How significant is this day for you? How would you summarize it in a nutshell before we get into the in-tray, the legacies and all that?
No, this is a very significant day for Kenya, for the country. And I think it's a triumph of constitutionalism and the rule of law. It is smooth transition of power from one regime to another in a democratic society is actually very significant. And of course, I've highlighted this twice in a Nigerian TV that Kenya is currently the gold standard of democracy and democratic transitions in Kenya. We tested all the systems, from the election all the way to the Supreme Court in a very peaceful manner, with the different candidates accepting the outcome, some grudgingly, but that is just how democracy is. So I think we've done well this time round, despite, of course, our usual quarrels, including even the role of media in this. But it's a proud moment for the country, it's a proud moment for development of our democracy.
Yeah.
And yes, there might be one or two small questions, but those are our internal issues. We are very proud of the country, on this particular day, and to congratulate the incoming president that will just be, inaugurating in a couple of hours.
Okay.
Thank you.
Gabriel? Is this a proud moment for democracy, like Prof says?
Well, of course. And Trevor, first of all, thank you for inviting us once again. What you've actually put forward, Trevor, it's the environment itself. It's very critical to the content that democracy represents in this country. And as you and many other people would know, there are several facts that affirm our republic and our constitution as being one of the most progressive constitutions that we have. And so when we are talking about a constitution that is progressive, we also have to put into mind that when it comes time, after every 10 years, or as it's stipulated in the constitution, we go back to the ballot. These are some of the facts that affirm our republic. And how do we go to the ballot? We exercise the freedoms that have been guaranteed to us by the very same constitution. That's why when we go to the ballot, we cast our votes are counted, a president is named, should there suffice, like we've seen. The aggrieved party goes to the highest court in the land. The highest court in the land comes up with a decision. And after that, the ceremony that we are witnessing today suffices. So today, the new leadership is at hand. It's a new dawn again. And our democracy has placed this environment as it's stipulated in our constitution. So today, all of us are witnessing what has been an idea that Kenyans themselves have put into the hearts of our republic.
Yeah. And Brigadier, I see you're excited when you saw that truck there. Like I mentioned, I will keep you out of the politics. So you talk about the protocol.
Trevor, it's a great day. I can assure you, for the military, a great day, to see this a handover and change of power. And to see these small things that make a very big difference.
Yeah. Exactly.
What you saw earlier was the ceremonial Land Rover, which normally the president will come to the State House in his official car, and the site will now jump onto the ceremonial Land Rover. It was so interesting to see that today, President Kenyatta will take the ceremonial Land Rover for the last time and take a lap around and then come in and have the guard of honor. After that, on leaving the scene, it belongs to the new president, who will now be president and commander-in-chief, which is very important. So you can see instruments are there again in terms of the ceremonial Land Rover, a very important instrument indeed.
And yesterday we saw the pulling of that Land Rover that you're talking about by the army. Why is that important? Or is it just a tradition that...
Yes. Trevor, that was on Friday, actually, not yesterday.
Yes, it was
on Friday. Yeah. It is a ceremony that, again, we do normally conduct, not only for the commander-in-chief, but all our senior commanders. Any service commander and above, and the VCDF, will have that honor, whereby we are saying goodbye with all due respect. And therefore, what you do is called the pulling out ceremony, where after the final official lunchroom, he now jumps on the official vehicle and is pulled out slowly with all the honors. He has the last chance to salute to his the troops as he moves out. He has the last chance to look at the beauty of the camp, and then eventually get out there and be told goodbye in a very professional and ceremonial manner. A very important occasion indeed, and very moving. In fact, very, very moving. Just like this ceremony, it's very moving for the person who's actually being given those honors on that day.
Yeah. Do we also expect a 21-gun salute today?
Yes, another very important function.
Yeah.
I remember in normal times, the 21-gun salute is reserved for any visiting head of state. Any visiting head of state in any republic will have as an honor the 21-gun salute. So he comes officially, and at the end of it all, is honored with that. Now, for us today, we have a new president. And being a new president, therefore, it just fits well that he also is given the 21-gun salute. It is indeed in honor of the incoming president that we have that gun salute.
Is it significant that the emblem on the vehicle seems to have been covered? Does that change? Like there's a flag that changes, right?
Now, what you can see, that Land Rover, it's very basic for now. But when the commander-in-chief sits on it, it takes a different posture altogether. Okay. There are no flags now. It's clear, you can see nothing.
Yeah.
There's no flag and all that. When it is officially now unveiled and he gets on top, he gets all the two flags coming in.
Okay.
On the right is that very important flag, the presidential standard. On the left will be the national flag, again indicating all the symbols of power and authority as the commander-in-chief at that time.
Yeah, so that can only be unveiled when he's in the vicinity.
Exactly, when he's in the vicinity, about to jump on. Other times, it is put off.
It is covered.
Yes, covered. It's covered. In the same token also, it goes along also with the presidential standard, which you're going to see today, which you're actually discussing here now. The presidential standard, again, is another show of power and authority to the commander-in-chief, or the president in this case. And it's only pulled up when he's present. Never when he's not there. When he leaves, it goes down. Okay. That's purely for him, in person. And that's why it is him who selects the colors of his presidential standard.
Okay.
It's amazing. I'm learning so many things. I've been seeing these things, Trevor, happening. The minute you see the president has arrived somewhere, there's a flag that goes up. And I always wondered, and I'm glad today when he leaves, that flag comes down so quickly.
It is his presence, power and authority that lies in him. That's why it's him who selects that flag. Today, you'll see a very important ceremony. In fact, very colorful.
Yes.
In that, after the inauguration, technically, the old president is no longer in power. And therefore, on one hand, his standard will be lowered.
Yes.
Wow.
As you do that, immediately, the other one will be raised and goes up. When President Ruto at that time leaves, the standard will be lowered.
Okay.
Yes, it will be lowered.
Interesting thing. Prof, let's get into the politics part of it. I know your protocol is important. We'll talk tell you this. But the legacy, because now today the sun rises with Dr. William Samoei Ruto as the 5th head of state.
Correct.
And it set yesterday with President Uhuru Kenyatta. But what is President Kenyatta's legacy? And can you separate it from Dr. William Samoei Ruto, who was also his deputy?
Yeah, I think I would summarize this as continuity and change. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but the beauty is that the incoming president has been part and parcel of the outgoing administration for a significant part, at least, fully. And then for a particular period, he's been, partially.
Yeah.
So the beauty with that is that he knows all the challenges that exist inside government. He knows how that entire system works. He knows the people that he'll need to work with, of course, because he will not be able to, to bring in a totally new administration. Yes, so the beauty with that is that he knows what he's inheriting, so he knows what he can actually fix. And what might be very difficult for him to fix. On the other hand, he also knows what they achieved collectively in terms of their vision for Kenyans. And most of these things that the Jubilee administration achieved in their first term and the second term are actually not contested. However, he also knows the big challenges, and basically, I mean, if you're going to look at Jubilee's achievements, we can look at that in a lot more detail. A lot of that has been in infrastructure. We know that Jubilee has delivered more roads than all governments from independence. We know Jubilee has had huge connection to electricity. We know the expansion of the economy. I think sometimes we only normally look at the debt bit, but our economy actually more than doubled under Uhuru.
Yeah.
We know the tax record in terms of what we're bringing in actually again more than doubled. Yes, but on the other hand, we also know the challenges that has made the incoming president and his team to win elections. It is the pains that Kenyans are feeling, and those are things coming all the way from debt. We have issues of a bloated civil service. We have issues of inflation and cost of living that has gone haywire, partly because of our own bad behavior, but also because of just things that are happening elsewhere. Yes, so I think the good thing is that the DP suffers no fools on these issues. I mean, he understands what the challenges are. He understands what he can do and what he cannot. So even some of those promises will have to be put into perspective.
Okay.
And I think that makes his presidency at the start, a lot more realistic, as opposed to, say, a purely populist, regime that were not part and parcel or had insights in terms of what was ailing the country. So what I expect of him and his team is a lot more careful and nuanced way of, approaching the quick actions.
Yeah.
Of course, at the top, people will move almost immediately. That is expected of any new regime. But in terms of changing approaches and policies and so on, we are likely to see more of an Akapancha approach, picking very specific things to deal with immediately, and then leaving the rest to, the midterm.
Okay. Gabriel, Prof is summarizing this as continuity and change. Is that how you see it as well, or is there a legacy? Is this legacy conjoined to the two of them, or can you separate that this is Uhuru's legacy as we wait for Ruto's legacy?
Prof has a point, because at one point you have to remember these two young men. And when I say young men, with all due respect, you're talking about the president-elect and the current president. They were a team in 2013 when they came in as Jubilee. And when they came in as Jubilee, as Prof is saying, they had a raft of ideas, that they needed to implement, which became the Jubilee Manifesto. And I think that legacy is very secure. And this is where I think I agree with Prof when he says William will not start from scratch. I think before, what the president-elect has termed as the handshake, we knew where we were going. We had these ideas. We had the Big Four agenda. This is how we crafted our legacy. So at one point, yes, there was a marination. Their legacy were intertwined. But the challenges have been there, Trevor. And those are the challenges which I feel President-elect will choose. Which one do I work on right now? Which one do I fix? Because he has the blueprint already. He knows one thing we cannot run away. He knows what is ailing Kenyans. So what will be the quick fix? Yeah. When you talk about the economy, that to me is something that requires attention. When you talk about things like the Big Four agenda, no self-respecting government should ever run away from those projects. You know why, Trevor? Because when they are properly implemented, I can guarantee you will see a shift, you will see a change. When you talk about agriculture and the fertilizer, the cost of fertilizer, Trevor, we are heading into the short rains again. That tells you there's some serious issues ahead. How do you fix that? How do you move quickly to ensure that the farmers, like what you were saying earlier on, I was listening to you when I was driving, there is that major concern of the food prices, the escalating of food items. How do you stop that? What are some of the quickest and the prompt of moves will you make to ensure that unga people are talking about is brought down? So to me, those are some of the things that he needs to hit so quickly because they speak to the hearts of men. Those are things you don't want to play around. And remember, that was a promise that was put in on the campaign trail. So you have the blueprint, which probably he knows he will achieve in 3 years or 4 years towards another re-election. But you have immediate things that Kenyans need. So there is that stopgap measure that you're going to put in. How do I fix the food prices? How do I fix the runaway corruption, the inflation? The dollar is almost heading to hit 123. How do you stop these things within the 100 days that the proverbial 100 days in office? Yeah. And I think the low-hanging fruit right now, first of all, is the food prices. That one has to be immediate. The economy. You have to bring in talent to ensure, this one has to be taken care of. The other thing is the debt. You have to put up an amazing policy to ensure that the debt immediately is managed. Trevor, you talked about 8-point-something trillion, 60-something% of our GDP. Right. That needs a serious, immediate arrest. But to finalize your question, I think the legacy of His Excellency the President Uhuru Kenyatta, I think it is intact. Right. When you look at the electricity penetration, when you look at the road infrastructure, when you look at the dams that he was talking about, exactly. The penetration of all these amazing services that Kenyans are grateful for today, I think they can be, pegged to the Honorable Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, but not to distance again the two. That marination of the first term and the second term of Jubilee may actually prove to be a good stepping stone for the president-elect.
Okay. Prof, before bringing in, we're still keeping live tabs on what's going on at Kasarani. Several leaders are coming in, elected leaders there as well. Earlier on, we saw the Deputy Inspector General, Edward Mbugua, also coming to the stadium as early as 4:30 a.m. There was quite a number of people heading there. 60,000 capacity stadium expected to be full to the brim as the inauguration kicks off anytime from now. But Prof, you wanted to react to this?
Yes, I just wanted to add. I just wanted to add there what Gabriel was highlighting there. That again, if you look at what the president did and the legacy, and I keep telling people that there's one president that's going to be very popular in the future, maybe not necessarily immediately now. No. You see, because if you look at the reconstruction of Europe after World War II, these guys put, that's when they put the tramways and they put the underground systems and infrastructures and so on. There was a lot of pain, actually. They were just getting out of war. And these were not popular things. people are not seeing the immediate benefits. Yet we know that that is the infrastructure that made Europe most competitive in terms of region globally. And even now, I mean, they've never really needed to invest beyond that because of, the long-term thinking. So the point I wanted to add there to what Mudumaya is saying is that a lot of the legacy projects that the president started, and they started in Kibaki's time,
yes,
are actually linked with our long-term competitiveness as a nation. Whether you look at the LAPSET and what's happening in Lamu, which is not complete. We've not even done 10%. And there are already impacts there. Whether you look at what's happening at the ports in Mombasa, whether you look at the SGR, which is not complete yet. It has reached only a particular level. Whether you look at the expressway, whether you look at the extensive exploration of electricity. In fact, at some point we were worried that Kenya might produce more electricity than we can consume. If you look at this, a lot of this and many others, the road infrastructure and so on and so forth, this infrastructure is infrastructure that's going to make Kenya very competitive in another 20 plus years. Yes, I think the president-elect, but the point normally is that if you ask people what they need, normally people would think about the next meal. They would not really think about the next generation. So a lot of what President Kenyatta has done, unfortunately, that is what was ignored a bit. So people were hungry while the president was telling them, don't worry, your children will eat, your grandchildren will eat, your great-grandchildren will actually eat. Yeah, so I think the president-elect, who actually is somebody that has quite a bit of depth of understanding of these issues, will have to do a careful balance between ensuring that there's food on the table and ensuring that there's beautiful legacy of eventually transforming this country into a modern economy that has gone on for quite some time, actually continues. Yesterday, I drove very close to this place, and I was smiling very, very hard. I came from the airport through the expressway, and then got into Thika Highway. I wasn't going to this particular venue, but I was going somewhere nearby there, and I was imagining what an average African president, taking that route would be feeling. I felt proud. Yeah. I actually felt proud. And the point that I was trying to say is that, yes, some of these, we can do a bit of bashing for political campaigns, but a lot of the investments that have been put in this country are good for us. They're futuristic, they're forward-looking. Yeah. Yet, at the same time, the beauty is that they give the incoming president a very, very, very clear starting point. Yeah. He has to protect this wonderful legacy that secures our future, but at the same time, we need food today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brigadier, like I mentioned, I'll keep you off the politics, don't worry. Let's talk about
This is food.
Let's talk about the protocol that we've seen there.
Food is very important here.
And earlier on, we saw some of the members of the uniformed service or the defense forces by the cannons, where there's a 21-gun salute. So this happens when there's a visiting head of state, like you mentioned earlier on. You can also walk us through it in terms of there are also empty cannons. But this time, it's happening in an inauguration. And also, there are 20 visiting heads of state. So do we expect that this 21-gun salute will happen here and then happen in State House as well? Because there's a luncheon there where the 20 heads of states are coming in? Or is this an honor for all of them at the same time, including the newly inaugurated president?
Yes, Trevor, as I did mention earlier, the gun salute is the highest honor for a visiting president. And normally you'll find that after all the functions, are over, state visit and all that, the evening before is when you find in State House and given the 21-gun salute. Now today is not for the visiting heads of state. It's the new president and commander-in-chief. He's the new visitor today to the Republic and to the office of the presidency. Therefore, today that gun salute is purely for the incoming commander-in-chief. Yeah. I should mention also that it's not here alone that you have the 21-gun salute. Normally, in terms of the gun salute, yeah, it's not here alone. And you recall very much in the past, we have had them being done. But for, let's say, look at the Queen of England, who has just passed away. We'll see a gun salute. Now, in Kenya, gun salute also is done in a smaller number. When the head of state or a serving head of state passes away, it is 21. When a retired president passes away, it is 19. The 19 gun salute for a former president. That also, again, is an honor that we bestow on those who have served us in that capacity. For today, therefore, as you asked, the gun salute, 21 gun salute, is purely for the incoming president.
Yeah. And you say the incoming president is now the commander-in-chief. In terms of protocol in the disciplined forces, how does it work? And is there almost like a stopgap measure, or does what the commander-in-chief say is done, regardless of what your feelings are? Who comes first, commander-in-chief, and then who do we go to?
Now, in terms of order and structure for the Kenya Armed Forces, and indeed the National Security Forces, the Supreme Commander and Commander-in-Chief is indeed the sitting president. And that's why you'll find that even in his car, you'll see the C&C.
Yeah.
And normally you see on major ceremonies, the 5 stars for the Commander-in-Chief. Now, for the armed forces, below him immediately is the Chief of Defense Forces, who is a general and a 4-star general for that matter. So when a vehicle comes, ceremonial vehicle, you'll see the 4 stars being portrayed there. So this is, again, in terms of history, something that's picked way back during the traditional wars, where in some kingdoms and empires, actually at that time, the royalty used to take part in war, and they lead troops into war. And because of that, therefore, you find that he has that power as the commander-in-chief. And indeed, it goes way back. In fact, if I can recall back in terms of history, we borrowed it very much from the Roman Empire, where we had something we used to call the imperium, or the empire. And therefore, the king would be the king, and also indeed the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. In history again now, you find that in time, others have also copied this. And of course, for us, we borrow very much from the British Empire, where for the British, actually the first person to take on that authority at that time was King Charles I of England in 1639, who became the king and also took over as the commander-in-chief of the entire forces, both in terms of the kingdom and what was outside the kingdom. And that, therefore, over time now, has been taken on, more so particularly by those coming from the British Empire. So you find that major power. In fact, today, as you see today, about 57 nations do actually have the president as the commander-in-chief. The remainder are a bit flexible. Some will put it in the prime minister. Some will put it in the defense minister, varying depending on your history and where you came from.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's listen into the sights and sounds at the Kasarani Stadium. There's a lot of entertainment going there. I wouldn't want you to miss out. Let's listen in.
ya kwamba askari ni wabaya tena ni haramu, hivyo wakaogopa tena sana. Siku za koloni wananchi walifikiria kwamba askari ni wabaya tena ni haramu, hivyo wakaogopa tena sana. Ewe mwananchi, nataka ujue askari si adui. Askari wote Kenya ni watumishi wako, hulinda maisha yako wewe. Ewe mwananchi, nataka ujue askari si adui. Askari wote Kenya ni watumishi wako, hulinda maisha yako wewe. Didi mama wewe. Oh! Walifikiria kwamba askari ni wabaya tena ni haramu, hivyo wakaogopa tena sana. Ewe mwananchi, nataka ujue askari si adui. Askari wote Kenya ni watumishi wako, hulinda maisha yako wewe. Ewe mwananchi, nataka ujue askari si adui. Askari wote Kenya ni watumishi wako, hulinda maisha yako wewe. Uka! Kenya kazi yao ni kulinda nchi yetu. Kenya polisi nao kazi yao ni utumishi kwa wote. Uaminifu na haki ndio mwito wa polisi wa utawala Kenya. Sisi ni watoto wenu baba na mama. Sisi ni watoto wenu baba, ye walinda usalama wewe.
A new dawn there at the Kasarani Stadium, with the 60,000 capacity almost filled to the brim as the inauguration ceremony of the 5th President of the Republic of Kenya, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, takes place at the Kasarani Stadium. It's a public holiday, quite a number of people already there. More than 20 heads of state are expected there anytime from now. Still with me in studio, Brigadier General retired Ahmed Mohamed, Director, Center for Security and Strategic Studies in National Defense University of Kenya, that's NDUK, Professor Alfred Omenya, Urban Development Planner, and Gabriel Muduma, Governance and Policy Expert, still with me in studio as well. Brigadier, before we went to Kasarani Stadium to listen into what's going on there, you were talking about the command structure, and you mentioned 5-star general, 4-star generals, and those are live pictures from Kasarani. Quite a number of people still breaching the walls and forcing their way into the stadium and jumping all the walls, getting in there. Earlier on, we showed you pictures of people forcing their way into the stadium. There were some injuries that were reported, and we saw some paramedics coming in, and this seems to be happening even now as we speak. The members of the public are expected to be seated by 8 a.m. You can see the security forces taking charge there, but there seems to be a breach of protocol as they come in. And Brigadier, this almost builds a security nightmare for the security services, because you can't use too much force, but yet there's a possibility of a security breach there. So how do they balance those two?
Trevor, this is quite interesting, because as you said, that balance is very important. On one hand, it's a very important day, and you can see the urge of the population to come and witness this important day. On the other hand, the issue of security cannot be compromised. And normally what we do in such instances, we apply something called layers of security. You saw that what you have is starting from far, almost like from the road, almost half a kilometer. Yes. You have it secured, and then coming backwards to the what we call the high-value unit, which is the stadium itself, so that the walls, external walls, are secured from the outside and from the inside. When you get to the building itself also, it's secured from the outside and from the inside. I think it looks like a bit they are overwhelmed in terms of the people now actually running over the wire fences there, which is not very good. It needs to be controlled here.
Okay. Yeah. And so you were talking about the 5-star general and the 4-star general. Is there any given point where the 5-star general is more than one in the country, or is it just the head of state?
Now, Trevor, the 5-star goes along with the title of Commander-in-Chief. Now, while that is the case, in other armies, you'll find that the 5-star is actually reserved for a field marshal. Field marshal, and I'm sure you can recall, although not really very appropriate, former president of Uganda, Idi Amin, who was a 5-star general. But normally the 5-star general is reserved for a commander who has led an effective operation in war in defense of his country. It's reserved for that purpose only, the 5-star general. And it still will apply, in most of the republics that is the case. But for us, indeed, at any one time, there's only one commander-in-chief.
Yeah.
In this case, it is the president. He is indeed the supreme commander of the armed forces. He has that overall authority. And in fact, that is vested within the Constitution. Article 131.41, where that power is given as the commander-in-chief. Then below him immediately, we have the Chief of Defense Forces, who is a 4-star, who in essence actually runs the armed forces in terms of day-to-day operations. And on the civilian side, of course, we have the minister who provides that oversight in terms of defense. But the minister has that chain of stars, no. The chains go from the president, the commander-in-chief, to the CDF, who is a 4-star. And then from there it goes to the service commanders, another very revered group who again, in terms of, as you said, service in Kenya, the Army, Kenya being the senior service, then the Air Force and the Navy, the Army commander is a 3-star general.
Yeah.
The Air Force commander is a 2-star general, and the Navy commander is indeed also a 2-star general. The stars go down from there now in terms of rank, where a Major General is 2-star, and then as retired Brigadier General is a 1-star general. It starts from there. 1-star general, 2-star general, going all the way into the 5-star general.
Yeah. In terms of the command structure, can the Chief of Defense Forces tweak maybe the command from the commander-in-chief? Or so, for example, you're mentioning why the significance of the sword, and even in terms of war, you said that this is what gives people direction. If you say attack, you attack. But then, in this particular regard, how does the command structure really work? Is the commander-in-chief's word in full, like that is the final thing that is done, or can that be tweaked to somehow fit the occasion if the Chief of Defense Forces thinks maybe the temperaments are not in the right place? As you can see, obviously, in Kasarani right now, it's the legislators who are coming in. Most of the elected leaders, you'll see quite a number of them coming through, and we'll show you live pictures from there. We're also waiting for the entourage of the president to head out from State House. That's a picture you can see up there, and live pictures from Kasarani, both inside and outside. We've seen a bit of a breach of security where people are storming in, and the legislative leaders will be coming through there. We'll be showing you live pictures. Yes, Brigadier. Is his word law that it can't be?
Now, remember, Trevor, as you said, and which is very important, that this power is drawn from the Constitution, in the sense that the president, on assuming office, first becomes head of state and government under Article 131(1)(a), and then, of course, under the same article, C, is where he becomes actually the commander-in-chief, and through that, therefore, he is the supreme commander. Now, part of what we know is that the idea of the president being the commander-in-chief is more like to preserve what you may call the civilian supremacy over the armed forces, that the armed forces indeed subordinate to the civilian authority. That is the essence. And remember also, within the same token, that the president is given other powers, that it is indeed the president, as commander-in-chief, who can declare a state of emergency. In the same token, is the president who will declare a state of war, of course, with consultation with Parliament. So that all is tied in within the powers of the commander-in-chief, so that he then gives direction. For instance, our going into Somalia, very much an unforced action, but it was authorized by the president as the commander-in-chief. And now, again, we come to other issues. That is the first, at the outset, at the start of the war, that authority must come from the commander-in-chief. Now, in the normal battles and small wars that go on, once the operation is on, that's left now to the commanders, the CDF and the service commanders, who now operate and run the small battles that they engage in as the war goes on.
Okay.
So the start and the end will normally come from the commander-in-chief.
All right.
Yes.
Let me bring in now Omenya and talk about the politics of it all. Yesterday, when the President Uhuru Kenyatta was speaking, he spoke about the GDP of having taken a country in 2013 with a GDP of 4.5 trillion and raising it to 13 trillion currently, also increasing the per capita income from 127,000 to 245,000. And he's saying that now the country has moved to a middle income economy. But is that felt on the ground, or do these numbers lie? Yet people say numbers don't lie.
Actually, numbers don't lie. I think the only thing that we need to look at, and that came from the election also, that all you need to ask yourself is which numbers. There's some numbers that are simply not on the table. You see, like the numbers of hustlers in the election, they're not very obvious. But having said that, I think this is in the spirit of what we've actually been discussing. It's true, the GDP has expanded, and it's true, per capita has expanded. But what I always tell people is that, you see, even if your neighbor grows rich, the average income in the neighborhood will be high. But you feel your hunger alone. And this is the issue that yes, I mean, the country's economy has been growing, but on the other hand, you see, I mean, if you're using GDP calculations and so on, if you bring in one billionaire and did the maths, it would seem like an average Kenyan has more money in his pockets. But the truth of the matter is that it doesn't. So the GDP can actually grow while there's a huge mass of people who then remain, poor. In fact, you can even have the numbers of poor people increasing as the GDP is actually growing. And that's partly why measures like GDP have been questioned, whether they're the most appropriate measures for broader development of a people and even a nation. And Trevor, if you remember where we started this bit of conversation about Uhuru's legacy, that legacy was and we made that point that it was looking at long-term development, but it was also looking at growing our economy in more the classical way, the top-down way. That yes, you put infrastructure. This will result in large companies, investing. It will result in large farms, generating agricultural produce for export, and so on and so forth. But then, on the other hand, it wasn't very clear how this would then trickle down to the common wananchi. And I think that is what the incoming president is also trying to deal with. That yes, we had this sort of development, and we're saying he has to be very careful how he treats it. It's still important in terms of our overall growth. But on the other hand, the question that's being asked is how do we ensure that every ordinary Kenyan, the life of every ordinary Kenyan is improved?
Okay.
Yes.
We'll come back to that in just a bit. How do we ensure the ordinary life of every Kenyan is improved? But let's listen into what's going on in Kasarani right now.
Wananchi tutulie tafadhali, tunyamaze ili kuweza kumpatia nafasi parade commander aweze kuendelea na majaribio ya gwaride hili. Asanteni, tutulie wananchi tafadhali. Tutulie wananchi tafadhali. Wanajipanga hivi sasa wakuu wa vikundi mbalimbali.
All right, live events there happening at the Kasarani Stadium. We see the members of the disciplined forces there, also the members of the judiciary just a few moments ago coming in, elected leaders also walking in there, different senators, governors, all from different corners having been elected and sworn in. You can see there's an entire disciplined forces on the ground there. Brigadier, what are we seeing in just a moment there? We saw some commands, we saw a band coming in. What was that all about?
Trevor, what we are seeing is what you may call the final rehearsals before the guard comes in officially. Remember, the guard will march in today at about 11 o'clock. That's when they march in. So what is happening now is more like the dry run, more like the final rehearsals, because as the armed forces are known for perfection, we don't take things for chances. And therefore, in everything we do a lot of practices and dry runs and rehearsals, indeed to appreciate that that practice makes perfect in all that you do. So indeed what's going on now is a dry run of the actual parade. I believe the final dry run before they go, take a break, put in their ceremonial tunic and come back in for the final show.
In fact, that was my next concern, because how come they're not in ceremonial? Why do they have their combat gear on?
Practice makes perfect. This is the final dry run, a final rehearsal for the commander to ensure that the sound comes out well, the breath comes out well, the soldiers are fit. You saw them in the morning doing a bit of drill. When they come in, therefore, they'll come in very proud, very smart, marching as required, with no issues at all, because they have done the rehearsal many times, they've done the final one, they're good to go.
Yeah, we saw quite a number of rehearsals being done earlier on. Is this about the military precision where they have to do things over and over again?
Again, we said that, and this is something that we need to actually the public and private to borrow. In all that we do, rehearsals are very important. Practice is very important. Dry drills are very important, so that you perfect it before the actual action. When you come, people think that you are born with it. But indeed it is that practice that makes you very good. As they say, practice makes perfect, and therefore no chances. The good thing is this drill is actually within the regulations. It's well published, it is documented, we read it and then practice it. Well, very much again borrowed from the British tradition with a bit of adjustments, to suit our own unique situation.
Yeah.
But something we are very proud of indeed.
Just a few moments earlier on, we saw again another breach of the security walls by members of the public jumping over. But in such instances, we've never really seen the army engage in one way or another. Is it a reserve for them to deal with much more serious issues? not a bit of people being wayward in terms of jumping over walls.
I should say again that indeed within the Constitution, we all have our different roles in terms of national security, where the armed forces is purely reserved for any external threat. That remains our key responsibility. Any external threat to the Republic.
Yeah.
Now, while that is the case, we know very well that internal security and the maintenance of law and order within the country is very much a domain of the National Police Service. That's why they do that. Now, what happens is that we have a second role, which is to assist civil authorities in the event of lack of law and order. And at that point, we are actually requested to come in. We don't come in. At all, we don't come in. Yeah. That division is very, very clear. That it will come from the president or the minister saying, okay, we are overwhelmed, please come in. So that division is very clear in terms of how we undertake our things, and therefore we limit ourselves for now to any external threat, which is key.
Until the request for assistance comes, you will not engage members of the public.
I like what you said. We don't come in. We are requested to come in. Because you see, if you do that, you can't have two forces coming in without a proper understanding. So for us to come in, again, there'll be instructions on how to come in, who does what, and the roles that we do. To avoid any clashes and issues across.
So a few people jumping over walls, that's...
No, that's not for us. As I said, that is still within control. As far as the National Police are concerned, still within control. They can manage it. Okay. The other good point also is that, remember, we carry actually heavy weapons. We are much more feared. When you come in, it's a different scene altogether.
Because increases, like Kenyans will like.
Exactly. That's why essentially we are confined to the barracks. When you come out, it's a mighty force coming out. I don't want to really have that employed on the same population. We try and avoid that. In fact, that's one thing we try and avoid. Using those same resources on your population, whom you're supposed essentially to be protecting.
From external threat.
Yes.
All right. Interesting revelations here. And Prof, you're finishing your thoughts on, we were talking about the GDP rising from 4.5 trillion in 2013 to 13 trillion now, according to President Uhuru Kenyatta. And you're saying the elephant is in how to ensure that everybody feels the trickle-down effect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think again, like we're saying, Trevor, on the continuity and change bit, that in a way, President-elect Ruto gets the baton of this GDP that's growing. Of course, we have debt issues and many others, but which is not being felt by the general population, by the mwananchi on a day-to-day basis. And I think this is where, good economists, Devin D was my friend, and we agree with him really that at the end of the day, what matters to the ordinary citizen is the fact that, their lives is actually getting better. And that can be done with the GDP growing. There's no conflict at all. And the incoming president already has some ideas around this, and we'll be very keen to see how that actually works. But of course, my counsel is that this is not new for us. President Kibaki, if you remember, took us there, where the ordinary person was getting facilities from the bank, money was available to ordinary farmers outside there. We saw, so there are quite a number of instruments and quite a number of lessons that we actually get from the past. That the incoming president, together with his economic team, can actually work on to ensure that our growth is then spread a lot more evenly.
Gabriel, is that what the bottom-up was meant to achieve? Because the Prof is saying that it's a small substrata of people who seem to be enjoying more than the others, and then therefore increasing the per capita income, but the general mwananchi doesn't really feel that growth. Even the 4.5 trillion to 13 trillion, they are seeing their situation is even worse now.
Trevor, from what I've heard or how I've actually read the bottom-up economics, it's an economic model. It's more of an economic theory, which tends to look how you can prosper people from the bottom coming all the way up. And actually, it's not that new of a theory, because it has been practiced in other jurisdictions, including the United States of America. Now, I agree with Prof, and sometimes people fail to see the correlation between when you're talking about the GDP. I always like people to, once you're addressing the GDP, to also address the outer relation with the food basket.
Correct.
All right? Because exactly, most of the time you see, the economy is growing from 3% to, and those are big numbers. Yeah, it appears the big numbers. Yes, the economy is growing by probably even triple or double digits, but does that, double digits rather, not triple, but does that really affect the food basket? Because those are two different animals. When me and Prof go to the food basket at the supermarket,
right,
what is contained in that food basket is actually what you take home. That is your pinch. That is your economic feel.
Correct.
The GDP, when you look at it, we may be talking about 13 trillion.
Yeah.
But you just said earlier on, and it's actually true, it's supported by numbers, that 60% of our GDP is debt. So do you see the outer divorce between our GDP and the food basket? When Prof goes with his basket at the supermarket, when he's paying the 2,000-3,000 on items that he was buying for 800, that is affecting him directly. The other may spur growth in other areas, but to him, the common mwananchi is, how much am I buying milk? How much am I buying a loaf of bread? How much is unga? That is how it translates the food basket. And that's why the relationship, sometimes I tell people, don't really, the GDP, those are bigger words for some people. Come closer to mwananchi. And that's why when you hear somebody saying the cost of living, that triangulates what me and you are facing today.
Trevor, let me just add on to...
As Brigadier, you keep watching what's going on, because I'll come to you to explain what was that.
An illustration.
Yes.
Say your income, increased to, say, 10 million. But then within that same year, you decided to put up a house.
Correct.
So that house actually consumes
totally
8 million or even 12 million.
Yes.
You'll find that if you're not careful, you'll find that you have no money. You actually have no money for food. You have no money for school fees.
Yes.
You have no money. Hence the balance. I used to live in South Africa. This was very interesting. Government was giving people free houses. And people are getting poorer with free houses. Because what would happen was that this would change their expenditure patterns. So you have a free house, then immediately you go and get some sofa on loan, and then you get all these appliances on loan, then you get some second-hand car to park outside your free whatever. So you find a guy who was living in a shack, and who had so many rands to spend on his drink and food and school fees and so on. Suddenly, this person becomes very indebted and does not have money for their day-to-day living. That is what has happened for Kenya.
Yes.
That yes, we have this nice house, which is important for us in the long term. If you check our books, our incomes have gone up. Yes. We have a bigger asset.
Yes.
But if you check, again, at what Muduma has explained quite whatever, we have no money to pay for the supermarket.
True.
In fact, I watched this, and this was totally mind-blowing.
Yes.
I watched this guy, out of frustration, get into the supermarket, fill his trolleys, and try to dash out of the supermarket, because he couldn't pay, but he needed particular product. That's the situation we're in, and we're saying, what you're telling the incoming president is that the house is important for us, but please ensure that we can also eat, and our children can go to school, and we can have our drink.
And my colleague Safina Chieng is joining me in just a bit. Safina Chieng Uma is here. My colleague, she'll be crossing over to our colleagues who are also at the Kasarani Stadium to find out what the latest is from that region. But Brigadier, let me bring you back in. We see the dress rehearsals continuing, but I've always wondered. So you were mentioning the significance of the sword, but there's also the guns. So at what point do these two interchange? Because at some point, there's always a command, the present arms. Why is that important? And how come just a few moments ago we saw one of the commanders holding the sword, bringing it close to their face and then putting it down? Why not just have the guns and present them like they always do?
Yeah, again, very much building into history in that the commanders will normally carry the sword as the show of authority and power, while the troops will actually carry the weapon. So you find that at any one time, it is the command that carries that sword. For instance, today, the parade commander, who is a lieutenant colonel, commanding that unit of his, infantry battalion, will carry the sword. Under him, you'll find there what we call companies, 3-4 companies. And each of those company commanders also, being a commander, will carry the sword. Again, a show of authority and the power, and where all the command will essentially be coming from. That is the essence of that. And again, of course, the fact that today we are giving the incoming president the sword, going to show again that all the command and power of the armed forces will come from him as indeed the commander-in-chief, and very ceremonic indeed. So again, a reserve for the commanders in battle. In peacetime, are preserved for the commanders who have that element of leading our troops in peacetime and in war.
Okay. Before Safina Chieng crosses to Chemutai Goin is at the deputy president. Right now, the president-elect's residence in Karen. We'll cross over to her in just a bit. But let's talk about this issue of Made in Kenya, one of the things that the president spoke about.
Yes.
How come we continue to miss the mark on this? Or have we? Have we missed the mark on the Made in Kenya? Because the president said in his own word that Made in Kenya and the domestic manufacturing, his administration has integrated and improved local manufacturing.
Of course. And let's not get lost, because this is something that I started hearing about in 2014, the Made in Kenya tag. And Trevor, the mere realization that we had places like EPZs, yeah, where you go to Europe, Prof lands in South Africa, goes to a supermarket or a clothing line, or a clothing store rather, goes and finds a t-shirt which he has never seen locally, but it's imprinted Made in Kenya. But we were talking about exporting purposes. Yeah, for the longest, Kenya has actually been an export powerhouse because of our labor. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing that. However, we needed to feel that that energy, we needed to feel that industriousness, we needed to feel it locally. And that is why we said we can do the very same thing, use the very same model, but manufacture things made in Kenya for local consumption. Yeah. And I think if you look at the grand scheme of things, if you look at our uniforms now, if you look at some of the things that we are bringing from outside, we have gone into, even though it is not manufacturing in the large scale, but in the right direction. Whether you're looking at what we saw during COVID, young men and women manufacturing beds, it can be done. Look at how we removed that tag of always importing such clinical equipment to doing it locally. Remember, the desks, the school desks for CBC, remember, we started manufacturing them locally. We are not bringing the seats that we are bringing and the tables that we're bringing all the way from China. That has been, brought home. The other thing which I think needs to be commended, and I found so many people not wanting to discuss this, is the gun manufacturing. Mm-hmm. Trevor, these are things that are driving this country in the right direction. Much of what Prof has said, which I think must be a takeaway as a national discussion, is some of these things are long-term. If we become myopic, I guarantee you we are going to lose a plot. Correct. We should start thinking, owning the region. Yeah. If you're talking about that manufacturing plant, let us not first of all think, and Brigadier is here, who will tell us, the first thing we are thinking is these guns will be misused. Why can we not change our mindset and think, guys, can we not supply this region with firearms that are made in Kenya? All right? The first negativity we think is somebody at the back door will be selling this. Brigadier will tell you, we already have a problem with small arms coming from, the war-torn countries. So really, this is a policy issue where we need to fix security so that we do not, or we can manage that environment. However, this is something that we, all of us as Kenyans, need to put a firm affirmation as to we need more of this. So once we think about building something, let us first of all bring in this goodwill that it can be done in this great country. Other than that, the negativity, I think, may end up hurting our industry more than it would, give us fruits that we can all be grateful for as Kenyans, as far as economic is concerned.
All right, let's cross over to Chemutai Goin. She's at the DP's residence in Karen. They're all there. Let's find out. Chemutai, good morning. It's good to see you. So where exactly are you and what's the latest from where you are? Because, the DP's residence is there. There's also the president-elect. So I'm wondering, where exactly are you right now?
I know by the end, of course, of the day, we will have sorted out that little issue of which title to use. But then, of course, this is the Deputy President's residence, and residing here is now the President-elect, who between 10 and 2 in the afternoon, as per the provisions of the law, as stated by the assumption of the office of the President, Chairperson Joseph Kinyo, who is also Head of Public Services, that activity must happen between 10 and 2 p.m. So we anticipate that, of course, any time leading up to 10 o'clock, we should have departed this area in Karen for the Kasarani Stadium. But I must say, Trevor, since we've been here, we've seen quite a number of delegations coming in here. He's still receiving a number of visitors. What we know is should be the Prime Minister of Israel, who's also here in a meeting with him. There are a host of other leaders who've been coming in for meetings before they can now depart for Kasarani. Earlier on, we saw ANC leader Musalia Mudavadi, who's also a principal in the Kenya Kwanza Alliance, arrive here. And just minutes ago, while you were still carrying out that discussion, we saw newly elected Speaker of the National Assembly, Moses Wetangula, also coming in. And I must say the transition of power is actually different. Just Moses Wetangula coming with all the security that that accompanies that all crucial office, that is of course noting that he's the third in command in terms of hierarchy. So it was quite also a spectacle just to look at that. But I must say, around here, the road leading up to this residence, is security has been heightened. From down there at the junction, as you enter now the current road, you can see that police have been deployed manning the whole road. And on the other gates that normally are used, of course, by leaders to also access this area, we've seen a number of vehicles. We know various individuals could be there. Maybe once we get inside there, we can be able to ascertain what meetings he's been able to have earlier in the morning. But then also we also saw a host of religious leaders. We believe earlier in the morning there was maybe quote unquote some devotion or some prayer session that was carried out. But we are still staying and pitching tent here. We will be giving you further updates, but we know preparations are going on. We've seen some members of the family coming in here before they can all depart together for Kasarani, of course, for the swearing in of William Ruto as Kenya's 5th Commander-in-Chief. And we know that, of course, a number of people will be accompanying him, but we can't divulge those details as of now until we are able to gain access. But Trevor, security here has been heightened. We've seen contingents of officers from the GSU, of course, manning the gates here and ensuring that everyone that is getting in has been cleared and has been allowed to, gain access. Of course, things have changed. And today, when the President-elect William Ruto leaves this place, he will be headed to the House of the Hill, State House, where that will be his next abode for the next 5 years, of course, as he runs the nation. And the new occupant here will be his Deputy President-elect Rigathi Gachagua, who was the former Member of Parliament for Madira, who we believe is also inside here for the meetings that they are carrying out, because earlier on we saw that, of course, he was getting ready in his residence. He may be passing by for a few meetings before departing, because we know there's an order within which the leaders who are now taking oath of office will be arriving, who arrives first, and of course before the whole session kicks in. But Trevor, that's all we have for now from here at the Deputy President's residence in Karen, where President-elect William Ruto is holding meetings ahead of his swearing in as Kenya's 5th president. Trevor?
All right. Thanks, Chemtai. Chemtai going there speaking to us live from the Deputy President's residence, the President-elect residence right now. Like she mentioned, we will sort that out by the end of the day, as Rigathi Gachagua also takes over that place. He's the current Deputy President-elect. And also live pictures from Kasarani. People started streaming in there as early as 4 a.m. Safin.
Yeah, indeed, it is a big day for the country, and if what is happening at Kasarani Stadium is anything to go by it, earlier when even I was following the program, you saw how Kenyans actually were so much anxious to be part and parcel of this particular ceremony that is going to be happening today, just sort of going beyond the capacity that this stadium can accommodate, just to witness this historic swearing-in ceremony of the 5th president of the country, Dr. William Samoei Ruto. Of course, Chemutai going there talking to us and telling us by the end of the day we will have sorted out this issue of whether we should be using deputy president, president-elect, or who is occupying the residence at Karen and who is going to State House. It will be clearer by the end of the day. But you can see on your screens there, this is actually such a moment for the country. A lot is to be expected, because on the campaign trail, the President-elect Dr. William Samoei Ruto gave quite a number of promises for the country. So he begins today to officially exercise that mandate as soon as he's sworn in. So just to get to probably the Brigadier Mohammed, you are seeing what is happening on the screen right now. We just want to know from you, just to explain to us what you're seeing, and probably in the next few minutes what we should be expecting as well.
And that match is actually much more brisk than the earlier one, Brigadier. Where does this difference come in?
Things are picking up now.
Again, as you did mention, Trevor, we actually now in the final dry run, and they'll be, when they come back now, they'll come for the final and official guard of honor. So what you saw actually was the point where the commander of the guard had requested for permission to march off the guard. It was granted, and therefore they were about to leave, march off the field. Now remember, again, a good point is that when the commander-in-chief, who is currently President Uhuru Kenyatta, arrives, he's going to inspect his final guard of honor as commander-in-chief. And when the guard is leaving, at that point, the oaths will have taken place, and the president-elect will now be the new president. It's therefore the new president who will give the powers to the guard of honor to now leave the field, because at that point he's in charge. So that we'll see again when it comes, that he will take the podium now and be told, Your Excellency, permission to march off the guard of honor. And then the president now elect, the president that time, not elected, the president now in charge, will now give those powers. So essentially, again, the dry run is what we are seeing, that is just being concluded before they go back, take a break, and come back for the final and grand ceremony.
All right.
Talking about dry run, how many dry runs have you like this, actually? But let's talk about a man who has been part of this dry run. Hassan Mugambi has been part and parcel of the preparations for this swearing-in ceremony. He's currently at the Kasarani Stadium together with our colleagues Rashid Abdallah, Sam Gituku, Lulu Hassan, among others, who are just there to ensure that you get every detail about what is happening at Kasarani. We are just going to be crossing over to them to get a picture and more details about how the event is panning out so far. Very good morning, Mugambi. What can you tell us about the status at the Kasarani Stadium?
Naam, ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaba mpenzi mtazamaji popote pale unategea runinga uipendayo ya Citizen. Karibu katika matangazo haya sasa kwa lugha ya Kiswahili, ikiwa leo ni siku ya siku ambayo inajulikana kama siku ya ndovu kumla mwanawe, ambapo tutakuwa tunapata rais wa 5 wa taifa hili ambaye ni Rais William Samoei Ruto, ambaye atakuwa anaapishwa hii leo. Kuna mengi ambayo yanatarajiwa, lakini siku peke yangu katika utangulizi utangulizi huu, labda niwatangulize tu wenzangu ambao tuko nao hapa katika uga wa kihistoria wa Kasarani, ambaye ni Sam Gituku na vile vile kabisa Rashid Abdalla. Ni mengi ambayo yanatarajiwa hii leo, ikiwa ni pamoja na tamasha za kijeshi na vile vile kabisa hotuba ya Rais William Ruto, ambaye ni hotuba ambayo itakuwa na mengi kama alivyosema mwenyewe alipoulizwa maswali ya nini atafanya katika kipindi cha siku 100 za kwanza. Alisema kwamba yote hayo yatakuwa katika hotuba yake hii leo. Rashid.
Na bila shaka nafikiri kama anavyosema Hassan kwamba ni siku ambayo labda inaweza kuwa ngeni kwa sababu ya uongozi mpya unaokuja, lakini sio siku ngeni kwa sababu ya yale yaliyopo katika katiba yetu ya Kenya. Kumbuka mwaka 1964 wa Kenya walikuja pamoja ili kushuhudia kuapishwa kwake hayati Mzee Jomo Kenyatta mwaka huo, na mwaka 1978, mwaka 2000, mwaka 1900 pia vile vile 92, mwaka 1997 ikawa zamu ya marehemu Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi, na mwaka 2002, mwaka 2000 pia vile vile na 7 ikawa zamu ya marehemu Mwai Kibaki. Mwaka 2013 ikiwa ni tarehe 13 mwezi wa 4 hapa Kasarani, mtazamaji, ilikuwa kwa nizamu ya Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta kuweza kuapishwa kama rais wa 4, na baadaye tarehe 28 Novemba ikiwa ni mwaka 2017 ikawa zamu pia vile vile kwa mara ya pili Rais Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta kuweza kuapishwa. Hivyo basi maraisi wa 8 wameweza kuapishwa katika nchi yetu ya Kenya. Leo itakuwa ni zamu ya kiapo cha 9 cha rais wa 5 wa Jamhuri ya Kenya, Sam Gituku.
And it's very interesting to see, of course, because of the noise that we are witnessing here in the stadium, it becomes very difficult from time to time to even hear each other, but also witnessing the sort of excitement that you find from the people that have made their way here. They arrived as early as 4:30 in the morning, and of course they've been here to wait for the arrival of the main person of the event, that is President-elect William Samoei Ruto, and of course alongside the Deputy President-elect Rigathi Gachagua. We have seen them as they prepare to make their way to this location, but also the excitement is palpable here. But also very important that to be waiting to see from the program. It should begin at about 10:30 when the main arrival should be happening, and then also the arrival of the outgoing president, that is Uhuru Kenyatta, who until now is the president, will be arriving at about 11:45. So we are just over 3 hours before that moment that will mark the start of the official ceremonies here. But also very important to witness even the introduction of the various dignitaries that have made their way here, some of them sitting speakers, sitting presidents of parliaments from different parts of the world, and also seeing some former presidents that have been introduced. And of course we hear from the officiators of these ceremonies, they will be introducing the vice presidents and the deputy presidents, and also the presidents that will be visiting, that will come in to witness this very important occasion for the country. And of course, Hassan, even as we continue, it is also a moment that presidents, like Rashid says, the 9th event, they have also taken this very important opportunity to describe what will be their agenda for the next 5 years. So it will be interesting to see how William Ruto converts the manifesto into being a roadmap to achieving what he has planned for the country.
Na bila shaka, na mbali na hayo pia vile vile kabisa Sam Gituku, tunatarajia kwamba kutakuwa na zile tamasha za kijeshi ambapo tutakuwa tunamuona akikabidhi mamlaka rasmi ama zile ala za uongozi yule rais anayeingia mamlakani, ambaye atakuwa anakabidhiwa ala zile za uongozi, ikiwa ni pamoja na upanga ule wa kijeshi na vile vile kabisa mkufu wa dhahabu na nakala ya katiba, ambaye atakula kiapo cha kulinda ile katiba. Viapo vyake vitakuwa ni viwili, kiapo cha kwanza kikiwa ni cha kulinda katiba na kiapo cha pili kikiwa ni cha kutenda kazi wa urais kama rais. Na vile vile kabisa wakati huo ambapo atakuwa anapokea zile ala za uongozi, basi tutakuwa tunaona kwamba bendera ile rasmi ya Rais Uhuru Kenyatta itashushwa kwa mara ya kwanza, na ile ya Rais William Ruto itakuwa inapandishwa, ama zile zinajulikana kama presidential standards zitakuwa zinapanda na kushuka kulingana na jinsi ambavyo anachukua hatamu. na hapo baadaye tutaona pia ile picha ya rais ambaye iko katika jukwaa kuu. Kuna katika ile jukwaa kuna ile presidential portrait ama picha ya rais itakuwa ni yenye kubadilishwa, iondolewe ya Rais Kenyatta na kuwekwa ya Rais William Ruto ambaye atakuwa anachukua hatamu kutoka hapo. Na vile vile kabisa ile bendera, ile presidential standard itawekwa kwenye gari ambayo atatoka nayo Rais William Ruto hapa hii leo. Mbali na ile bendera ya Kenya upande wa kulia, kutakuwa na bendera ya presidential standard ya rais upande wa kushoto, na hivyo ndivyo itakuwa kuanzia leo hadi wakati ambapo ataondoka mamlakani Rais William Ruto. Tunajua kwamba presidential standard hizi huwa na nembo ya chama cha KANU. Wakati ambapo marais walikuwa wa chama cha KANU, tuliona yule jogoo katika presidential standard, na vile vile kabisa tukamwona yule njiwa kwa bendera ya Rais Uhuru Kenyatta kuashiria TNA, na vile vile kabisa lakini Rais Kibaki alikuwa hana ile nembo ya chama, alikuwa na ile olive branch, kumaanisha kwamba serikali yake ilikuwa ni serikali ya pamoja. Alipata serikali kwa ya ile wengi wanapenda kusema nusu mkate, lakini ilikuwa na olive branch ya kwamba anaashiria kila mmoja, na bendera yake ilikuwa rangi nyeupe kuashiria amani. Na sasa ya William Ruto tunataraji kwamba itakuwa na wheelbarrow ndani yake kuashiria ama wanasema kwa kimombo capture ile aspiration yake yule president ambaye anachukua hatamu hii leo.
Na bila shaka sana tunayazungumza ni ya ukweli, kwa sababu kumbuka kwamba Daktari William Samoei Ruto ashakula kiapo hapa takriban mara mbili. Amekula kiapo mwaka 2013, lakini kiapo cha unaibu wa urais, na pia vile vile akala kiapo ikiwa ni mwaka 2017, lakini katika siku hii ya leo atakula kiapo tofauti. Atakuwa anakula kiapo cha rais wa 5 wa Jamhuri ya Kenya. Kumbuka ni safari pana, safari ndefu ambayo ina historia kwake, maanake ni safari ambayo alianzia kitambo. Nafikiri mwaka 1997 alikuwa anatafuta kiti cha ubunge Eldoret North. Labda hakuwa na fikra kwamba atakuwa rais, lakini hatua baada ya hatua, ngazi baada ya ngazi, hatimaye katika siku ya leo chini ya mwamvuli wa Kenya Kwanza kama mgombea urais wa UDA, Daktari William Samoei Ruto anatarajiwa katika siku ya leo kuja katika uwanja huu wa Kasarani akiwa tayari kupokezwa vile vyombo ambavyo vitakuwa vinamsaidia hala za uongozi kuweza kuendeleza. Lakini kuna swala moja ambalo tunauliza ni kwamba ukiangalia idadi ya wale ambao watajitokeza katika siku ya leo, nazungumzia viongozi wa mataifa kando kando, inaonyesha kwamba bara la Afrika lina umoja mbali tuna Jumuiya ya Afrika Mashariki. Lakini ni swali ambalo watazamaji wengi wanataka kujua, manake katika kiapo cha mwaka 2017 liona kwamba rais wa Rwanda alifika, wa Uganda alifika, wakati huo Salva Kiir alifika, Farmajo wa Somalia alifika, wengi walifika. Ukiangalia katika wale ambao wamelakiwa na viongozi kama spika wa seneti Amason Jeffa Kingi aliweza kulaki pia vile vile jana, ambaye ni naibu rais wa nchi Afrika Kusini. Tumeangalia kiongozi Adan Duale akiweza kumpokea pia vile vile rais wa Somalia. Tumeangalia mwenyewe rais mteule Daktari William Samoei Ruto akimpokea rais wa Jamhuri ya Demokrasia ya Kongo, akipokea rais wa Msumbiji, akipokea rais wa Rwanda, na wengi wanatarajiwa katika siku ya leo. Kuna watu wanasema imefika wakati kama Afrika Mashariki na Afrika kwa jumla tuwe na sera ambazo zitaleta uongozi kwa mataifa haya kwa kuleta umoja na watu kushirikiana. Sam Gituku.
And I think it's also a testament to the sort of stability that the country has witnessed, if you're to focus on since 2007. That in 2007 you saw that swearing in of President Mwai Kibaki at State House with no visiting head of state. But now today the numbers have grown to the extent that you find current sitting presidents, vice presidents or deputy presidents, but also some former officials of those countries making their way here. So it is a testament to the sort of importance that Kenya continues to generate across Africa, but also across the world. And I think what we have to do, because there's so much a celebration here in the stadium, would rather allow you to witness how Kenyans are speaking to the rest of the country, that is from here, the Kasarani Stadium, that they have chosen to speak through song and to speak through their own excitement. Listen.
Halo, sound check 1 2. Halo. Sound check 1 2. Halo, majaribio ya mitambo. Halo. Sound check 1 2 5 4 3 2 1. Sound check. Majaribio ya mitambo. 5 4 3 2 1. Sound check. Halo, sound check. Bado kidogo. Halo, sound check 1 2. Halo, ukaguzi wa mitambo. Sound check. Check 1 2. Hello, sound check. 5 4 3 2 1. Sound check 1 2.
Okay. Pictures as we see there, thousands of Kenyans have already showed up. The 60,000 capacity stadium is full to the brim. In fact, there's a press statement by the National Police Service on filling of the presidential inauguration venue at the Kasarani Stadium to capacity. They say that today, the 13th of September 2022, is the day for the inauguration of the 5th President of the Republic of Kenya at the Moi International Sports Complex, Kasarani Hero Stadium. And number two, they say that in anticipation of being part of history, Kenyans have thronged the venue in large numbers, as by 5 a.m. this morning, the venue had already filled to capacity as more people continue to troop to the venue. And on number three, they ask people to stay away, Safin. What are they saying?
Indeed, as early as 5 a.m., it had already been full to capacity. Now you can imagine several hours down the line how the situation is looking like. We saw some unfortunate scenes there earlier. But the National Police Service is actually going further to advise that to avoid logistical challenges, this is to request the public to make alternative arrangements to